Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
I'm Caroline Hyde at Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York. Ed Ludlow, he's off today. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang says the company plans to upgrade its AI accelerators every year. We bring you the details from Taiwan as he steals the limelight from AMD's Lisa Su. Plus, we sit down with the CEO of Qualcomm to discuss AI PCs. That's all amid the Computex conference over in Taiwan that kicks off. And GameStop shares surge anew as Roaring Kitty unveils a $116 million position in the company. All that and so much more ahead, but first let's check in on these markets. It is a macro picture. It is a slowdown in manufacturing that actually helps send stocks to the upside, and indeed the borrowing market, the debt market, 10-year yield carrying down by some 9 basis points, as some of the slowing in the economy seems to be good news for investors who want to see some ability for the Fed to cut rates. Of course, we have some big labor data later in the week. Nasdaq coming off of its highs, we're up just 0.1%. I want to shine a light on the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange here, the Intercontinental Exchange, off by 0.75%, actually hitting some of the lows of the day. That's that they seem to be having some technical glitches, as is currently being the technical phrase being used. But think of Berkshire Hathaway, think of some of the stocks that have been impacted to the tune of a 99% drop just for a few seconds. We're currently off by 0.8%. We'll bring you updates throughout the hour. Meanwhile, I want to shine a light on some of the individual names that are on the move today. And look, GameStop has been where it's at. At one point pre-market, it was up more than 100%. Now we're up some 30%. As Roaring Kitty, or Deep Value, as he's known on Reddit, took back to another form of social media, going on Reddit to post what seems to be $116 million long position in GameStop, making him one of the top 5 holders of this name. The crowd goes wild. Paramount up some 7%. That, as we understand that maybe we could be getting nearer that deal for Skydance, as David Ellison offers a sweetened bid for some $15 a share. It's not at that level yet, so still some caution out there from investors. And the stocks off by 0.5 percentage point right now. AMD on the downside, but other chip names being galvanized by some of the announcements coming out of Taiwan. A big set of announcements, but big key landmark focuses coming from both Nvidia and indeed from AMD. The Computex trade show is in fact underway. All the chip makers, the heavy hitters, are present. And Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang basically took the stage last night when he stole the show somewhat, introducing new tools and software models.
Your future laptop, your future PC will become an AI. It'll be constantly helping you, assisting you in the background. The PC will also run applications that are enhanced by AI. And your PC will also host applications with digital humans that are AIs.
Now, he announced a Blackwell Ultra chip set to debut in 2025 and the next generation platform, another one in development called Rubin in 2026. Meanwhile, the actual keynote of the event was meant to be AMD CEO Lisa Su. She announced the company will speed up the rollout of new AI processors too. Let's get the details of all of this. Bloomberg's Dana Wallman is here to join us. And, well, it felt as though Jensen Huang sort of organized himself an event, a keynote speech, even though he was the keynote talker of the previous year. But it seems to be the pace of announcements that the investors like.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think it's going to be even trickier for tech reporters and editors such as myself to keep track of all these code names and project names. We're already talking Blackwell Ultra and Rubin, even though the 2024 chips are still forthcoming. So the roadmap keeps getting longer and longer. And AMD, to its credit, is also committing to annual refresh cycles.
Annual refresh seems to be what people want to see. What was it that maybe Lisa Su lacked, given the investor stock reaction, that Jensen Huang is able to bring? Is it just that Nvidia is so dominant, particularly when it comes to data centers right now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think AMD is in a catch-up position, and Nvidia is the reigning leader in the AI space, and I don't know that that is changing anytime soon. I also think, interestingly, just on a personal note, this is a study in two different leadership styles. Huang is sort of seen as the embodiment of Nvidia itself, whereas Lisa Su sort of surrounded herself by this really large collection of heavy hitter industry partners, from PC makers like HP and Lenovo to the Windows chief over at Microsoft. And not to denigrate that approach at all, but it is really interesting to observe two very different approaches.
Coming from two people who come from Taiwan, both speaking in Taiwan, in fact, are in some way related, which is an extraordinary thing to really consider, the fact that Jensen Huang and Lisa Su are vague cousins of one another. But what they're trying to steal is the limelight of artificial intelligence in the future. Is the AI PC managing to land? Because that seemed to also be where Lisa Su was shining.
I don't think just yet. And that's partly that they're not available, and partly that I don't think the companies involved can speak so clearly to what the software applications are exactly. So I think, rightfully or wrongly, it might seem to some people like a solution that's in need of a problem.
Yes.
And I don't know that that's going to be true in the long term, but I do think you've got these chips, they hold great promise. I don't think the software applications are as obvious. And meanwhile, I don't think Nvidia has to persuade anyone of the utility of its chips, whether the 2024 chips, 2025, 26, et cetera.
And always naming these with code names of, well, very prominent scientists, often diverse scientists, people of color with Blackwell or a female with Lubin. I'm interested in who wins from both. And there are suppliers who serve both Nvidia and indeed AMD.
With Taiwan Semi being the biggest. And actually their stock was up more this morning than even AMD's, I noticed.
And the fact that also, I mean, are we worrying about bottlenecks? Because this seems to be a real focus, particularly some of the higher focus on memory.
Nvidia did flick at that in their keynote yesterday. So I wouldn't say it's not a concern. I think it's been a strong concern, but Nvidia is looking to assuage the public, investors, that memory won't be such a bottleneck going forward.
Particularly if they're able to keep on promising these updates coming in 2025 and 26. Great to have your take, Dana Wellman, there with all what's happening in Taiwan, but not quite all, because we want to focus on another chip name, Qualcomm's processors. When they're now powering Microsoft and Dell's new AI PCs as part of the company's years-long effort to grab a foothold, basically, in the PC market. Pleased to say our own Ed Ludlow caught up with the Qualcomm CEO, Cristiano Amon, ahead of speaking at the Computex conference in Taiwan this week. Just take a listen.
So people are going to be able not only have the best performance, not only have the AI use case, not having a very small and thin laptop, but they're going to have battery life for everything they need to do. You're going to leave your charger at home.
Cristiano, from one technology nerd to another, when grandmothers all around the world go to the store and buy their first AI PC, and they take it home and they try to plug in their printer, will it work?
Of course it will. So one of the things that it's important to understand the journey that we have been on Microsoft is it's a fundamental shift from Microsoft changing Windows from x86 to an ARM instruction set, and it's changing to an AI PC. And part of what we have been doing is to bring the ecosystem along. It's not only the printers, it's not only the docking station, also the games. We've been working with Microsoft to have the top 1,200 games optimized on the platform, and it's really about the future of the Windows ecosystem. So the thing to think about it is not only you'll be able to work with an old printer, but you'll be able to do things you were not able to do before with your old PC.
Cristiano, we recognize the following that Snapdragon X Elite has. You can go on any social media platform, I see it. But Intel still sort of dominates the traditional sales channels for PC. They've got their name on all the shelves. You know, Qualcomm's in a different part of its history, but do you think you can take them on those sales channels, the marketing spend, the R&D, where they're quite entrenched?
Okay, so on the R&D, I beg to differ. I think the performance leadership now is clearly within the Windows ecosystem, and is clearly with X Elite. Just looking on the CPU performance. Orion's custom CPU developed by Qualcomm's the fastest CPU out there for any personal computing. And then the NPU and the AI engine, it's only possible on a Qualcomm platform. So I do beg to differ on the R&D, but let's just talk about the big question, which is, it's a new market, it's a new channel for Qualcomm. And I'll tell you what is different this time. There are two aspects. One aspect is consumers are more savvy, and consumers actually come from a phone. Actually, your most important purchase decision, I will think today, is your smartphone, and you have a lot of knowledge coming from the phone. So Snapdragon is not something new to you. But the most important thing is actually not that. What the most important thing, when you usually see the incumbency position on PC, is at the enterprise. But the enterprise actually has us and Microsoft 100% aligned. Usually enterprises have been slower to adopt new version of Windows, but Microsoft actually is doing a great job with enterprises around the world to get them to embrace the Copilot and the Copilot Plus. So that's a big tailwind that Microsoft is driving the enterprises into the future of AI PC. That's great news for Qualcomm, and that builds on the incredible platform with the Snapdragon X Elite.
Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon speaking with Ed just last week. Coming up, we'll be joined by Kristen Smith, CEO of Blockchain Association. We're going to be talking about crypto in the election, crypto in regulation. This is Bloomberg Technology. Let's just talk about crypto and the lobby that is boosting its war chest ahead of the US presidential and congressional elections in November. Andreessen Horowitz, for example, Ripple, another one that's just been announcing a donation of $25 million each. That was just last week to the pro-crypto PAC Fairshake, which aims to back candidates from both sides of the aisle who will better represent the crypto industry's interests. Let's bring in someone who knows well what lobbying is like on the Hill right now. Kristen Smith, CEO of Blockchain Association. Look, it's your members, including the sector's leading investors and companies. And Kristen, is the lobbying landing? It feels to me, given the action last week, that certainly members of Congress are aligning themselves more with crypto.
Yeah, no, great question, Caroline. I think it is clear that the month of May was a game-changing month for the crypto industry. I think the industry has long felt that the SEC and other regulators really haven't been giving us a fair opportunity to work constructively to find the right kind of regulation. And the industry is upset. And I think over what we've seen over the past couple of years, and really just mostly in the past few months and weeks, is continued investment into the tools that can help bring more crypto-forward policymakers into power, and also constructively work to get the right kind of policies. So we've seen a tremendous amount of investment in the Fairshake PAC. I think that, as you noted, some very large investments over the past week. That is the largest industry PAC out there of any industry. So obviously a wonderful tool for the industry. But I think more importantly, what we're seeing is that individual crypto users are following these issues. Digital Currency Group did a poll with Harris X a couple of weeks ago that found 1 in 5 swing state voters consider crypto a major issue in the upcoming election. And I think what we're seeing is both at the presidential level and at the congressional level that candidates and policymakers are seeing this and realizing that they need to be more responsive to working with the crypto industry to get better policy.
But Kristen, how then do you push back on a discomfort that basically you're buying your way to Congress listening to you, rather than it being coming from the users of crypto talking or wanting?
Well, it is coming also, though, from the users of crypto, right? It is sort of a 1-2 punch here. I think we've got, the industry that is willing to put the investment in. But as I was saying before, we have individual voters that are writing their members of Congress, that are looking on congressional and presidential websites to see what does this candidate believe about crypto policy. This is very unusual, right? Like, we don't see bank customers going out and doing this, but we are seeing this business in the crypto world.
Yeah.
And it's because crypto is more than an industry. It is an ecosystem with users and creators and developers and a lot of independent people contributing to these networks. So, we're very excited about this sort of newfound political power. At least I know I am, as somebody who has seen both sides of it. But I have been telling people, we have now gotten to like base camp of Mount Everest, and we need to get to the top of the summit. We have a long way to go. It's a hard journey ahead of us, but we're certainly in a much better position than we were even a couple of weeks ago.
Is it a hard journey when it comes to the actual current administration? Because we still had a veto, for example, coming from President Biden when it comes to SAB 121. Can you just talk us through ultimately what SAB 121 was wanting to push for? It seemed to be, wanting to allow more banks, institutional banks, be able to offer crypto investments, but at the moment it's pretty costly for them to do so.
No, I think you said it exactly right. So Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 was a piece of guidance that came out of the SEC a couple of years ago. And what this does is it really puts in place an accounting policy that makes it impossible for banks to go into the business of custodying crypto. I think inherent in consumer protection is consumer choice, and we want to have more responsible institutions that have the ability to custody crypto assets, especially now that we not only have the spot Bitcoin ETF, but we'll soon hopefully have an ETH ETF. We want to have more custodian options out there. And so Congress realized that this policy was passed without any public input. The GAO viewed it as a rule, which gave Congress the ability to use a special Congressional Review Act process in order to try to undo that rule. Both the House and Senate, in a bipartisan manner, voted to repeal the SAB 121 guidance. But unfortunately, President Biden did sign that veto on Friday. So I think, we've seen a lot of progress with the Biden administration in being a little bit more open-minded towards working on crypto policy. But, without question, that veto was not received well within the crypto industry and the crypto community. It's incredibly disappointing. And I still think we have some work to do with the administration.
We want to thank you, Kristen Smith, CEO of Blockchain Association, really talking about how politics is infusing itself with crypto or vice versa. And let's just stick on politics for a moment. What's happening over in the United Kingdom? Of course, he was a key proponent of Brexit, of Britain exiting the European Union. Nigel Farage is now saying that he will stand as a candidate in the United Kingdom election, which of course is being fast-tracked to this summer as it stands. Farage says he'll stand in Clacton on the coast of Essex, and ultimately he's standing for a candidate in the UK election, so wanting to once again become a member of Parliament as it stands. So he was, of course, a Brexit champion, and we'll bring you more on that. Time now for Talking Tech. First up, online fashion retailer Shein is set to file for an IPO in London as soon as this week. According to a person familiar with the matter, the offering could value the company as much as $64 billion and could become one of the UK's biggest IPOs ever. Bloomberg News reported in February that Shein was actively looking at London after it judged it unlikely that the SEC would approve a New York initial public offering. Meanwhile, shares of GameStop are surging after the Reddit account that fueled the 2021 meme stock mania posted what appears to be a $160 million position in the retailer. In a screenshot, the account, operated by Keith Gill, showed a stake of 5 million shares at $21.27 apiece, positioning Gill at one of the company's 5 biggest investors. We'll have more on that later. Meanwhile, shares of Paramount are trading higher. Bloomberg News has learned that the movie producer David Ellison's latest offer for Paramount Global includes an option for non-voting shareholders to cash out on a portion of their stock for about $15 a share. The cash payout is the latest attempt by Ellison to basically sweeten the terms of a deal that he has faced opposition from some investors on. The offer is basically roughly 26% premium to Friday's closing price and is only for some of the shares. For more on this story, we're pleased to welcome Chris Palmieri. And look, is that why we haven't seen the shares immediately fling themselves to $15 for those non-voting ones? What is still the caution around it?
Well, people aren't going to be able to sell all of their shares at that price. And for the rest of the company, there's still a lot of uncertainties, overall uncertainties about the media business. But we know some of the points about this deal, but we really don't know everything. But the big picture here is this amounts to a giant takeover of this storied company. David Ellison will control not just the controlling shares of the company, but the majority of the stock in the business. 41 years old, he's got a potentially long road ahead of him running this business.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the big take here.
He's not doing it alone. Redbird Capital there, along with his father, Larry Ellison of Oracle fame, that are putting up a lot of the cash here, Chris. I'm interested in the long term is that then Skydance gets folded into Paramount. Some of the debt is paid off. But what's the future of this business look like?
Well, that's kind of the next step that we've been asking a lot of questions and we don't have answers entirely. We know that they're going to be making some changes. There could be a deal for the Paramount Plus streaming service, say a joint venture with Comcast or another streaming company. That's been a business that's been losing a lot of money. There could be some sales of other assets. That's something that has come up quite a lot. But I'm sure this will be positioned as David Ellison and his partners investing in the future of the content of Paramount. So there'll be a lot of talk about movies and TV shows, many of which we're familiar with, and one still to come.
The holdouts, the value investors, the people who have been in this stock for a very long time and still need some persuading. What are they worried about here, Chris?
Massive dilution. So the Redstones are getting bought out at a premium. It might not have been as high as it was a while back, but it could be, considerably higher than what the stock they have the voting A shares are trading at now. And so then everyone else will be able to get some of their money out, but are largely stuck with this business. They have even sort of less control over than they had before this deal was because Ellison will own so much of it.
Well, we have to see with the sweetened offer how Ariel Investments' John Rogers responds to it, how Mario Gabelli does as well. It'll be interesting to see how this continues to unfold. But Chris Palmieri, your team has been leading a charge. We thank you very much for the latest on Paramount.
When Apple launched the new iPad Pro in May, one of the big questions was if the iPad can finally replace the laptop. After using it for about 2 weeks instead of primarily a MacBook Pro, I can confidently say that the new iPad can replace laptops for most people in many use cases. A big driver of that is the new Magic Keyboard. It has a metal design, but also a full function row and a bigger trackpad, making it much more like a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. The other thing is Stage Manager. Apple over the past year or so has made major improvements to Stage Manager, a new multitasking interface that lets you run multiple windows side by side and move them around on your iPad display. But Apple will need to take that to the next level, enabling support for more than 4 windows at once, as well as a speedier interface, plus expose multitasking-like features from the Mac in order to really make the iPad Pro a true pro device. The other thing, a bigger screen. While 13-inch displays might be enough for college students or people who are traveling, consumers who work from home, video editors, photographers, or people like myself want an even bigger display. For the iPad Pro to really take off, it's going to need a combination of even better multitasking plus a 16-inch version to match the MacBook Pro. I'm Mark Gurman. This is Power On.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York. Let's check in on those markets. They're doing well if you're in tech. They have been managing to be higher than this. We're coming off of our highs, but we're still up 0.2% on the NASDAQ 100. And we're seeing some optimism around, some of the data coming from the US economy not being quite as strong as we'd seen. Does that leave the Federal Reserve room to cut rates later in the year? Manufacturing seems to be speaking to that today. The 0.2% higher on the NASDAQ. Big tech is leading the charge. 10-year yield down by 9 basis points on the back of that manufacturing data. Bitcoin up some 2%, in fact, just showing a little bit of risk on sentiment around crypto today. Let's move on and have a look at some of the individual movers. Look, we're just hearing from Mark Gurman all about Apple. We're up more than a percentage point. That's actually as Goldman Sachs seems to be getting excited as well from its focus at WWDC. We're looking ahead to, of course, the announcements that Apple might make. We think AI is going to be largely one of them interweaved within Siri. We're looking at Nvidia up more than 3% as, maybe Jensen Huang steals the show from a keynote that was meant to come from the key Taiwanese Computex event from Lisa Su of AMD, but Nvidia makes their own event and announces yet further developments in chips coming on an annual basis. We're up more than 3%. GameStop up 26%. Why? Well, they're surging after Keith Gill, aka Roaring Kitty, shared a post actually on Reddit this time, showing what appears to be a $116 million position in the company. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's Bailey Lipschultz. His actual handle is a slightly expletive-ridden deep value, Bailey. And what does it seem to show?
Yeah, DFV is back, and that is on Reddit. First time in almost 3 years posting on Reddit showing that potentially massive stake. There's a lot of uncertainty and an inability to verify if that position is in fact Keith Gill and if it is in fact real. And the main uncertainty around that is the fact that the last time he posted an update on that portfolio, last time checking in on the portfolio, was worth about $34 million. So a humongous jump in terms of the actual value underlying that position, in addition to the fact that there's some $45 million potentially in cash. But nonetheless, it drove a flurry of trading activity this morning. At one point, the stock was up 105%, opened up 75%. But as you mentioned at the top, closer to 27 to 30% gain for GameStop, tracking some of the buying and selling on apps like Fidelity, that platform, showing modest buying orders outpacing those to sell. So it doesn't really feel like that 2021 craze where a number of investors were rushing in to buy it. As you can see, these stocks well below those all-time highs back in 2021. I'm
looking at the biggest holders. That's the joy of the Bloomberg terminal. You can see who the biggest holders of a name like GameStop. And of course, it's RC Ventures, Ryan Cohen, who've made his name in becoming the GameStop leader de facto with chairmanship and the like. But we've got Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Where next? I mean, I love this story from a technology perspective because it's being driven to us via social media. Originally, it was X when the first excitement brewed in May. Now it turns to Reddit. I'm wondering when YouTube's going to come into play again.
That's what I'm wondering. And I just off of a hunch, it feels like with earnings and the company's AGM coming up in a few weeks, maybe Roaring Kitty Keith Gill posts a YouTube video for the first time again in about 3 years. Maybe that'll be the next driver. Carol, the main thing that stands out to me when I look at this stock and you look at the follow through this month compared to May, that May flurry really lasted 2 days. Shares more than tripled in a 2-day span, quickly gave back the bulk of those gains. GameStop took advantage of that to sell shares, to raise cash through an at-the-market offering. The question is, with today opening up 75%, giving back the bulk of those gains, can Roaring Kitty, can Keith Gill find a way to keep the momentum going into the earnings? And whether this is going to be, again, a flash in the pan that lasts 2 days, does it last 1 day, or does it return to YouTube and potentially kind of opening the floodgates, bring back a number of those retail investors, just given how different the underlying dynamics are for the company, for short sellers, and for the world as a whole now compared to where it was at in early 2021.
Well, for now, AMC, BlackBerry, some of the other companies doing very well off the back of it too. Bailey Lipschultz, great to have you back on the show. Thank you. Meanwhile, let's talk about Tesla for a moment. It's issued a statement against the ISS views on, well, his pay package, remember, Elon Musk's, that is, after the proxy advisor, ISS, urged shareholders to reject Elon Musk's pay package. Of course, it's been coming back from previous years. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's Max Jafkin. Look, there's a long statement. This is all regarding a 2018 performance award that ended up being ginormous, but largely because the market capitalization of Tesla and the stock performance became phenomenal.
Yeah, so this award, as you say, 5 years ago roughly, was made with the idea that if Elon Musk were able to grow the market cap of Tesla by an enormous sum, he would get this gigantic pay package. You know, $56 billion is the number you see thrown around. You know, at the time, these proxy advisor services, Glass Lewis, which is another one, and ISS, both advised against it. Shareholders voted for it anyway. The difference now, though, is that the gain in question has already happened. So you sort of have the board asking to pay Elon Musk even though the thing that he was supposed to achieve has already been achieved. And in that press release, a big part of Elon Musk's argument is like, hey, we had a deal. It's not fair to go back on that deal. And so he's sort of resorting to that, to this kind of basically like a moral point. And you have ISS and Glass Lewis, on the other hand, saying, look, on one hand, this is an insane amount of money. It's too much money, even given the gain of the market cap. And also, you know, it's not clear that shareholders had enough information. And also, again, the gain has already been realized. So it's sort of a little bit hard to justify.
Hard to justify Meanwhile, the board and indeed Tesla seems to be trying to justify that ISS has got a lot of things right by saying this is a mountainous market cap growth, and the 2018 continues to create a strong incentive for Elon overall. But they say technically ISS is getting something wrong with how the payment is being made. What do you make of, I mean, ISS is going to respond, I suppose, to whether they're technically right or wrong.
Well, Tesla is engaged in what amounts to a marketing campaign. So we're going to have a vote in 10 days. The vote is going to largely involve Elon Musk and his brother Kimball are not going to be able to vote in this election or in this proxy vote. And Tesla is campaigning. You know, they're advertising, they're producing videos, and they're producing documents like this press release. Probably more importantly, Elon Musk is tweeting about this all the time. And we're seeing a lot of SEC filings that are essentially Elon Musk responding to various influencers, sort of pro-Tesla bulls, talking about this vote. So they're trying to reach, retail shareholders, which is the main base of ownership of Tesla.
And apparently they've got to decide whether or not Elon was actually galvanized by this stock compensation. The question is
well, you have like a fear among even Tesla bulls that if this pay package isn't approved, that Elon Musk could just walk away. Mm-hmm. And that is something that Elon Musk himself has kind of helped stoke by saying, hey, there's all this AI stuff. Maybe I'll do it outside of Tesla, maybe not. So you have this kind of bit of a game of chicken, which is on one hand, Elon is saying, I'm committed to Tesla. I love it. I care so much about it. On the other hand, he's making these threats, and there is this fear that if he walked away, that would hurt the share price because so much of Tesla's, investors, so much of what is about the company has to do with Elon Musk's, essentially his cult of personality and his reputation as an innovator.
June 13th, we wait, we watch. And for the marketing ahead of it, Bloomberg's Max Chafkin, we thank him. Meanwhile, let's just talk about EVs in another way, because Ford CEO Jim Farley says his company is just 2 years away from offering technology that will allow drivers to take their eyes off the road and their hands off the wheel. Caught up with Bloomberg's David Weston. Just take a listen.
We're getting really close. In fact, we can do it now pretty regularly with a prototype, but doing it in a cost-effective way is just the progress we're going to need to make. We have to build the electrical architecture inside the company. We can't delegate it to our suppliers anymore. We need all the software code in the company to control the car, but it's close.
Coming up, New York Tech Week. It kicks off right here in the Big Apple. We'll speak to some of the key participants from the event. That's next. Meanwhile, let's just keep an eye on some of the stocks that are on the move. Autodesk, want to shine a light on this software company, is higher to the tune of 7%. No financial statements will be restated or adjusted following the results of an investigation by the board's audit committee. We understand the CFO has been reassigned after the internal accounting probe, but a weight is lifted. This is Bloomberg Technology. New York Tech Week. It's back, officially kicking off today in the Big Apple, with industry titans, VCs, startups gathering throughout this week for events, panels, conversations, so much more. All week long on Bloomberg Technology, we're going to be speaking with those founders, those investors, those executives to discuss the ecosystem right here in New York City, why they choose to call NYC home. I'm pleased to say we're joined now by Julie Samuels, CEO of Tech NYC. Look, it is the organization representing New York's fast-growing entrepreneurial tech industry. You're also very much in the weeds of how we can support this, whether it's from self-mentorship, whether it's from coming together as an industry, whether it's the government's role here. Why is New York City feeling like the place to build a startup right now?
Well, I think there's so many reasons. It feels incredibly optimistic here. The energy is palpable. Tech Week especially, but even without Tech Week here, it feels amazing. I think a big part of that reason, honestly, is people want to live in New York. People want to live in New York. We've seen that there's a lot of net migration here. In recent data shows about 15% of relocating tech workers actually come to New York City. And because people want to be here, there's just an enormous amount of energy around what people are building, where they're plugging in. And we're seeing it at all ends of the spectrum. Huge companies, tiny startups, everything in between.
Yeah, there's events coming from old school New York tech. IBM want to be seen as, of course, current, still modern day innovators, but have been based in New York State for a long time. But then there's the founders and the startups and the VCs that continue to come here. Andreessen Horowitz, for example, putting their boots on the ground. I'm interested as to what people are building then from a startup perspective. Is it all about artificial intelligence here too?
So artificial intelligence is obviously booming here. There's well over 1,000 venture-backed startups. They've raised something like $27 billion collectively. That's just the AI startup, kind of the AI segment of our startup ecosystem. But the thing about New York, I think, that is incredibly special is because every other industry is headquartered here or has their center of gravity here, what we see is startups building in all of those segments. And that is that diversity of type of company is what really sets our New York tech sector apart in a way that I feel like is incredibly healthy.
A diversity of industry and problems and solutions. Yeah. What about diversity of actual talent?
So obviously we have a lot of work to do there. I will say New York is better on that than any other major city in the U.S. We have something like 22% of the workforce here is from underrepresented groups, which is significantly higher than in the Valley or in Boston. We obviously have a lot more work to do, but our tech community here is pretty engaged there. We partner with New York City public schools to get the kids the students, into the companies, meeting the right people. There's a huge push to teach computer science in our schools. There's a huge push to work with nonprofits across the city to get more New Yorkers into the tech ecosystem. At the beginning, I talked about how we attract a lot of people who want to move here. Mm-hmm. We also need to make sure that New Yorkers who are born here and raised here have access to these jobs as well.
I mean, what is it that we have a new focus on Startup NYC? That seems to be a support system for diverse founders?
We're working on a project at Tech NYC, the organization I run, called Startup NYC, where we kind of put a little bit of scaffolding around some programming for some underrepresented founders building in some really interesting, maybe non-traditional spaces. We don't put money into those startups, but what we do is we kind of help them with our network. We help them understand how to navigate the space. Tech NYC's network is amazing. It pretty much represents everyone in tech in New York. And what we do to these founders is say, hey, we're going to help you get access to those people, not just people in tech, but also the entire business sector here, which is their customers, their clients, their mentors going forward. And that, to me, is what's really exciting.
I'm sad Ed isn't here because at the moment, look, we're two women in New York. And of course, we're going to say that New York's the best and amazing to build technology companies in. But San Francisco is doing a mighty fine job at ensuring you feel really reinvigorated around AI. In particular, OpenAI is out there. And still all the headquarters of the biggest technology companies in the US is West Coast. Yeah. Does it matter? Ultimately, can all boats rise? Do we have to have this NY versus LA versus West Coast?
Well, let me say this. First of all, I think all boats have to rise. The technology jobs, however you define tech, these are the jobs of the future. This is what the economy, the world economy looks like going forward. So we need, across the country, across the world, we need all boats to rise together. So I hear what you are saying, and I actually agree with you. I love New York. There are different versions for different people of how you want to build this. I think historically what we've seen is a lot of startups building kind of hard technology on the West Coast. Then they tend to expand here when they're ready to apply it, when they're ready to figure out how to make it profitable, who's going to buy the technology, what it's going to look like in practice. So I think we'll see a lot of that happening here in New York. There's one other, this is kind of, maybe this is a little trite. There's this little kind of saying I like, or not saying. This is how I think of the difference between the Valley and New York. I used to live in the Valley. When I lived there, and it was great for a lot of reasons. When you live there, you meet a lot of tech people who live in the Valley. But when you're in New York, you meet a lot of New Yorkers who work in tech. And that speaks to me and how I want to be in the world. But again, for everyone, you should do it your own way.
Here's to boats rising. Here's to all the events that you've got to navigate and sail through this week. Julie Samuels with all the energy this Monday. Tech NYC CEO, we thank her. Meanwhile, let's have a quick look at what's happening in New York, at the New York Stock Exchange, no less, because the New York Stock Exchange basically is saying that technical issues have been resolved. Look, there was a glitch, shall we say, earlier that was hitting companies such as Berkshire Hathaway, some volatility, some halting that was happening. They now say that the technical issue has been resolved at the New York Stock Exchange. Parent company, ICE. We want to continue our coverage of New York Tech Week. Joining us on why he's building right here in the city is Michael Sharlow. He's Fireblocks CEO. Fireblocks was actually founded in 2019. It's a digital asset security platform that that helps financial institutions protect digital assets from hackers, from theft, important problems you're solving. Why solve them from New York?
Thanks for having me here. So clearly New York is the financial center globally. And it was really important for us to be as close as possible to the market, basically where a lot of our clients are. And our first design partners, basically the first early adopters of our technology, were here in New York.
So fintech makes total sense. You, of course, your previous company was purchased by Checkpoint. And you've been building businesses for a long time. You understand what is necessary and the ecosystem that's needed to be bred. What is it that's here that also supports you other than your client base?
Yeah, so actually it's a good point. With the previous company, I actually moved to San Francisco, and then Fireblocks, we really started in New York. And really the main reason was, first and foremost, to be really close to the customers. When you're in San Francisco and if you're doing a B2B startup, it's actually quite difficult to basically meet your customers where they are, unless you're basically selling directly to the tech sector. All the other sectors are either on the East Coast or somewhere in the Midwest. And the second component is that actually if you want to have global reach, and Fireblocks today is really a global company, New York is much easier. First of all, more people transit through New York and you can meet them over here. And second of all, it's actually easier to fly to Europe or Middle East and so on.
Time zone is nicer, I can imagine.
For sure.
What about the talent base? We were just talking about how people, perhaps there's net immigration for people wanting to be in the tech sector, work within the tech sector, coming to New York. Is it still tough to hire here?
It's tough, but I would actually argue that at least for us, it's easier to hire here than in other areas. The main reason is that we really trying to find people that have this combination of technology and finance, right? Because basically, there are not that many people who run crypto or digital assets companies at scale. And in New York, you can find really great leadership and individuals that they have deep expertise in finance and I would say deep expertise in tech, maybe slightly less than in SF or the Bay Area, but it's still enough, and the combination is really crucial for us.
I can imagine also it's relatively helpful being but an Amtrak ride away from Washington. At the moment, crypto is being regalvanized in some ways by changes in legislation. How is it affecting you?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, been on that train quite a few times in the last couple of years. To be fair, I think we've seen pretty decent momentum, the US. Clearly, globally, I think that this is probably the most important thing, that we're still seeing the global regulatory landscape front-running the US. We hope that it will start catching up towards the end of the year. The approval of the ETFs by the SEC was a big, very strong tailwinds for the industry and for us. And actually bringing it back to New York, I think that actually in New York, the New York DFS, the New York Department of Financial Services, they've been probably one of the most thoughtful state regulators in the US that we've been working with closely for the last couple of years.
Okay. I'm glad that we're managing to interweave how politics, of course, is intersecting with crypto and indeed with New York right here. Michael Sholov, great to have some time with him, Fireblocks CEO. Hope you come back and we can talk really about the business and how it continues to grow. But meanwhile, look, that does it from this edition of Bloomberg Technology right here from New York. Do not forget to check out our podcast. You can find it on the terminal as well as online on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeart. So many choices. From New York and, of course, from San Francisco. Back there tomorrow. This is Bloomberg Technology.